Maybe even court.
Oh,
But the executive order that we did up to jurisdictions, yeah, but that did not. That the Green Court matched it municipal.
okay, but we're still, well, as of tonight, we're still out.
Don't have them in here.
Council meeting is now in session. If we would, we will go ahead and get the council meeting started. Call it to order. And we'll have the invocation pledge allegiance by Councilman Terry Jacobs.
Heavenly Father and Almighty God, it is only your will that we seek. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing else. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Take this now, down if you all don't mind. Okay, at this time we have the proclamations. Miss Beth?
Yes, sir.
If
Could
you
you
would.
join us down here? Could you join them down there?
Huh?
Could you join them down there?
Yeah, I sure will. Yeah.
If everybody took those. Well, this is a little girl who said, "Family."
Mr. Brown? Whereas the Fair Housing Act, enacted on April 11th, 1968, enshrined into federal law the goal of eliminating racial segregation and ending housing discrimination in the United States. And whereas the Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing based on race, color, religion, sex, familial status, national origin, and disability, and commits recipients of federal funding to affirmatively further fair housing in their communities. And whereas the town of Somerville is committed to the mission and intent of Congress to provide fair and equal housing opportunities for all. And whereas more than 50 years after the passage of the Fair Housing Act, discrimination persists and many communities remain segregated. And whereas acts of housing discrimination and barriers to equal housing opportunity are repugnant to a common sense of decency and fairness. Now therefore does Ricky Waring, Mayor of the town of Somerville, hereby proclaim the month of April 2021 as Fair Housing Month. The next proclamation is for Municipal Clerks Week. Whereas, that's mine. It is. Yeah.
Beth, you should go on the other
Yeah,
side.
yeah.
Go on the other side.
If you guys all want to go down, make sure you can while I read it. Yeah, no?
You want to sit down a little bit? Okay. You want me to get in the middle? Okay.
All right. Whereas the office of the municipal clerk is the oldest among public servants and is the only municipal staff role that is required by state law. And whereas the office of municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at all levels. And whereas municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all. And whereas, regardless of the town or city size, municipal clerks have seen their roles and responsibilities expand with changing times. And whereas, municipal clerks get their professional training from the South Carolina Municipal Finance Officers, Clerks, and Treasurers Association, an affiliate organization of the Municipal Association of South Carolina. And whereas the municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the municipal clerk office through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and annual meetings of the International Institute of Municipal Clerks. Now therefore does Ricky Waring, Mayor of Town of Somerville, hereby proclaim the week of May 2nd through May 8th, 2021 as Municipal Clerks Week.
If I could say just a couple of words, this lady represents all of us who sit up here and bug her day to day. And I really don't know what they bug her about because they don't come to do me or Jill. They go directly to her. And evidently she does a good job because they don't come to me and complain about it. So Beth, I congratulate you for an outstanding job that you do for us. And I even go to you when I need to, and Jill goes to you too. And so, you know, we just got a great organization, I think, operating the town of Somerville, and you've been a very important part of it and continue to be a very important part of it. And thank you so much for what you do for the town of Somerville. Thank you very much.
Russ? Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the town of Somerville. And whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and in the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste system, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the town of Somerville to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2021 marks the 61st Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association, now therefore does Ricky Waring, Mayor of the town of Somerville, hereby proclaim May 16th through the 22nd, 2021 as National Public Works Week.
I'm gonna have to say a few words about Russ too, because I've known him a long time. He's got probably the toughest job in Somerville, because traffic, flooding, garbage, trash, you name it, he's got it. Because the biggest complaint that comes before my desk is all those things I've just mentioned, plus many, many more. I got another one today I talked to Rebecca about, and that's dogs with people walking on the street with their dogs, doing on the street. So we're gonna have to find a way to put trash cans on the street for their dogs to do their, business after their, anyway, I'm not going to that. But anyway, we'll take care of it, and that'll go down to Russ. So congratulations to a guy that's done a job for the town that everything falls under him that we get the most complaints on. And he tries his best to take care of them. And Russ and I have been together for a long, long time, off and on. But much deserved, Russ, for Public Safety Week and all your guys. I mean, I know them. I know the ones that work in the trash crew. I've just been here long enough to get to know them as friends of mine. And I congratulate all of them. And thank goodness we got them. And congratulations to you and all your department. Thank you very much.
Michael? Whereas the International Economic Development Council is the largest professional economic development organization dedicated to serving economic developers, providing leadership and excellence in economic development for communities, members, and partners. And whereas economic developers promote economic well-being and quality of life for their communities by creating, retaining, and expanding jobs that facilitate growth, enhance wealth, and provide a stable tax base. And whereas economic developers stimulate and incubate entrepreneurism in order to help establish the next generation of new business, which is the hallmark of the American economy. And whereas economic developers attract and retain high quality jobs, develop vibrant communities, and improve the quality of life in their regions. And whereas the mayor and members of town council recognize and extend their appreciation to our regional partners in the work of economic development, including Berkeley County Economic Development, Charleston County Economic Development, Dorchester County Economic Development, the Charleston Regional Development Alliance, the Berkeley Charleston Dorchester Council of Governments, the Greater Somerville Dorchester County Chamber of Commerce, the Charleston Metro Chamber, and Somerville Dream. Now therefore does Ricky Waring, Mayor of the Town of Somerville, hereby proclaim the week of May 19th through 15th as Economic Development Week.
Again, I would like to say, the town hired Michael Lyle right before I got sworn in, or became sworn in for the mayor. He and his team have been working diligently to create more economic development for the town. And a few times we fought him on that, but now I think we're moving forward. And congratulations, Mike, to you and your team and what we're doing to create economic development for the town of Somerville. We've got to grow in economic development. If we don't grow there, we'll die on the vine. I'm a pro-economic development mayor, and if it takes bringing residential development in town to grow economic development, I'm all for it 100%. So that's what we got to do. And you're doing a good job at that, I believe. And y'all continue to do what you're doing. And congratulations tonight. Thank you very much, sir.
All right, Ms. Ossie, can you come up? Whereas on the morning of April 21st, 2021, 9-year-old Ossie Talbot awoke to fix her blanket and smelled smoke and noticed an orange glow coming from the front window of her house on Kirksey Drive. And whereas once Miss Talbot realized that the house was on fire, she immediately went down the steps to her bunk bed and exited her bedroom door. And whereas Miss Talbot went to her parents' bedroom where they were still asleep and unaware of the fire and woke them and alerted them to the fire. And whereas once the parents were alerted by Miss Talbot's warnings, the pair ran to get the rest of the family out safely. Now therefore does Mayor Ricky Waring hereby proclaim that the town of Somerville recognizes the heroic actions of Ossie Talbot that prevented a horrific incident from turning even more tragic.
Before I let my son say something first, who's fire chief, I had the opportunity to serve as fire chief in this town for many years. You know, this is quite an honor here tonight. We did it a couple of times when I was fire chief. You know, this young lady is to be congratulated beyond the duties of anybody that ever existed on 2 feet. You know, she did what it takes to be a hero. I mean, she is a true hero. And to congratulate her tonight is really an honor for me, being a former fire chief, and my son being a fire chief to follow me in the fire service is an honor. And I just can't, it almost brings tears to my eyes to hear this proclamation. And you guys standing in the back of the room, brothers to me, y'all need to clap. I mean, everybody needs to give an applause to these people in this room. I mean, because it's just heartwarming to me to know that, you know, lives were saved because of this young lady and her mother standing here beside her, and you and Daddy, and her father. You know, very few times has this happened. And it's just congratulatory to my heart that this can happen in America today. And it happens all the time, but we don't hear about it, you know. And darling, I want to tell you something. You're the sweetest little thing I ever saw in my life. And I'm an old man, and I got grandchildren. All of them now, I hate to say, older than you. And I love you to death. And I congratulate you to the bottom of my heart. And I want you to know you will never leave my heart. I promise you that. And just thank you for being here. Thank you for being here when I was mayor and also while I was former fire chief of this town. Thank you so much. And now I'm going to turn it over to my son. Okay?
Also, on behalf of the Somerville Fire Department, we want to present you with the Citizens Life Saving Award for your actions that night on April 21st. Your actions, no doubt, saved the life of your whole family. So thank you again for what you did. Thank you for keeping calm. And a lot of kids your age wouldn't have been able to pull that off. So it's very heartwarming. And as the mayor said, it does hit your heart to know what you did that night. So thank you, and we appreciate your efforts.
All right, tonight we're going to recognize a few of our citizens who have served on our citizen boards, commissions, and committees. When I call your name, please come up. Elise Richardson from the Board of Zoning Appeals. Francis Townsend from the Municipal Election Commission. And Kelly Johnson from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee as the secretary. Oh, sorry. All right, we just have two.
Thank you all very much, very much. Where we at? Okay, approval minutes of the previous council meetings, town council meetings, April 8th, 26th, budget retreat on the 5th, if we can do them all one time, April 10th. May 10th, excuse me.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to amend something in the Public Works under item D. If we could hold that out.
I'll make a motion that we approve items A, B, and C at the same time.
I'll second.
Did I get a second? Yep. Okay, motion made and second. All in favor, signify by raising the right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Okay, all opposed, same, motion carried. Okay. Okay, which one?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I would make on item D on the Public Works Committee. I would like to make a motion to amend the last sentence in item D on the report states, Mr. Bailey made a motion, seconded by Ms. Gardner Schmidt, for staff to explore the option of making Golf Road one-way entering the street from South Main. The motion carried unanimously. My recollection is, and I may have misstated it, I don't remember it correctly, but I thought what I was trying to convey was that I was asking town staff to consider opening the right-of-way, the unopened right-of-way, and make that a one-way street that you would enter from Golf Road one way and exit onto 17A. So I would like to move to amend that to reflect what I just said.
And I'll second that amendment.
Okay, Walter, what you're saying is when you come in from 17A onto Golf Road, that's going to be one way?
No, sir. No, sir. What I was saying was that the unopened right-of-way extends from Golf Road to 17A. And my motion was to consider opening that right-of-way and making that a one-way street where you would enter from Golf Road and exit on 17A.
Yeah, okay. All right, any discussion on that? Does everybody understand that? Okay. All in favor of that, signify by raising your hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise? Ayes carried.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we now approve the minutes from the standing committee meetings.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Okay. Opposed, likewise, I stand it. Okay. Hearing for business license appeals and calculation fees. At this time, I'd like to turn the meeting over to my Bill McIntosh, the Mayor Pro Tem, to handle this for me.
This is an appeal to town council of a calculation of business license fees. Mr. Ellis Leeseman is present, who represents the appellant, which is Summit Contracting Group. And Mr. Parker, you're representing the town, is that correct? Under our rules of procedure recently adopted, it is not mandatory, but each party is allowed to make an opening statement not to exceed 5 minutes. You're also going to be allowed, but not mandatory, that you have a closing statement at the end, not to exceed 5 minutes. The appellant is limited to 25 minutes, but does not have to take the full 25 minutes. And the respondent is limited to 15 minutes, but does not have to take the whole 15 minutes. So Mr. Leeseman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Councilman McIntosh, Mr. Mayor, and ladies and gentlemen of council. In speaking with Mr. Parker, we thought that we would waive opening statements, and so I just might make some brief introductory remarks. So please begin my 25 minutes, which I will not seek to use. And I salute each of you for your public service, and I know you have a full agenda, so I will not take any more time than is necessary to present this important issue. Again, my name is Ellis Leeseman. I'm an attorney in downtown Charleston, but my mother, Elise Richardson, just received a commendation. So I have some Somerville roots and connections. I'm here on behalf of Summit Contracting Group, which is based in Jacksonville, Florida. Mr. Bernie Cornelius is here. He's the company's vice president. He's going to speak briefly to you and provide some testimony to you in support of this appeal. Summit is here, and they're doing business in the town as the general contractor of the multifamily project that will be known as Solis Nexton over in the Nexton planned development. It's about a 320 unit multifamily project, which is now underway. It is recognized that a business license is required for Summit, even though they are out of state. They are doing business in the town. The issue with this appeal is not whether a business license is required, but it's an appropriate calculation of the business license fee. In this case, or in most cases, they'll pay a business license fee of $3,000 to $4,000, maybe sometimes as much as $7,000 or $8,000. Under the current circumstances, they've been charged $126,086.48. by the town of Somerville for the privilege of doing business as a general contractor. The reason for this appeal is that within your ordinance and within your business license fee ordinance, there is a phrase that states that the business license fee is going to be based on gross income, but gross income will not include either payments made to governmental entities, escrowed funds, or, and this is the key phrase for this appeal, funds that are the property of third parties. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here before you today to introduce our belief that in the general contractor-subcontractor relationship, where subcontractors perform work and then they package together their payment request along with the general contractor, and it goes to the owner, that those funds that have been earned by the subcontractor, they are their property, whether you look at that under a contract or under a state law right. Because once those payments have been received by the general contractor, they are obligated to pay those within 7 days to the subcontractor. Why? Those are the subcontractor's funds. They are their property. So in that sense, that's where we would look at a difference of a $126,000 fee and a fee of $7,000, which at the conclusion of the appeal, we will present would be the correct calculation. This project is approximately $40.5 million. But the amount that's received by Summit is limited to the amounts that are for fees and or charged for overhead. It's about $1.9 million. So in other words, they're paying between 8 and 9% of their entire earnings for this, just for the business license fee to the town of Somerville. Basically, they're being taxed on money that's going to go straight to subcontractors and material suppliers that by law has to go to those parties. They by contract and by law are entitled to receive those monies. Then the town also has those subcontractors pay for business license fees. So the monies get taxed a second time. Again, they are the subcontractor's property. Sometimes there are subcontractors, as Mr. McIntosh knows. I know he does some construction law. That would represent a situation where there is a third set of business license fees charged on the same amount of money that Summit has already been taxed upon, resulting in such a high fee. So we believe when the proper meaning of that phrase in the business license ordinance is read and is understood, that it should not include, gross income should not include property, funds that are the property of a third party, that this business license fee would be reduced down to $7,410.20. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to ask Mr. Cornelius, with Councilman McIntosh's permission, we just are going to go through a brief set of questions and answers to allow him to present, help me present this.
Absolutely.
So, Frank. Mr. Cornelius, could you just state your name and your employer for the record?
It's Bernard R. Cornelius. I'm Vice President of Summit Contracting Group for 20 years.
What are your job duties with Summit?
I review all estimates. I negotiate all the contracts with the owners. I'm over all the departments, including estimating.
Are you involved with projects and the oversight of projects that are in the state of South Carolina?
Absolutely. We're heavily active in the Southeast, from Louisville, Kentucky, south to Miami, Tennessee, Carolinas. Matter of fact, we're doing one right over in Ridgeville.
Mr. Cornelius, could you describe the Solus Nexton project for you?
It's about 320 units, around $40 million Class A project. It's going to be a beautiful project for your community, and I'm glad to be here to build it for you.
What did you have a budgeted amount over the anticipated business license fee that you would expect to pay the town?
We budget approximately $10,000 on all of our out-of-state projects, because the business licenses in Florida are minimal. They're like a couple $100s, and some of them are transferable from one area to another. But out of town, we always budget $10,000.
Was the fee that was ultimately charged after you made application to the town $126,086.48?
Yes.
What was your reaction to that amount?
Never saw anything like it in my entire life. And it's kind of hard to go back to the owner because we can't apply for what the fee is until we put the budget together and it's gotten approved. And by then, the owners have already submitted their lender and got their financing all approved. And all of a sudden, we reach out to the community. and we find out there's $100 and some thousand fee. Over and above, every one of our subcontractors are going to get charged the same amount of fee again, the same labor and material.
Could you describe for town council the contractor-subcontractor relationship briefly and how, in Summit's view, the funds that we're talking about, pass-through funds, are indeed the property of a third party?
We are strictly a pass-through company. We do not self-perform anything. We manage the properties, the construction of the projects for the developers. Once we have a contract with the owner, we issue contracts and purchase orders to all the subcontractors for every line item that's in the contract that needs to be performed on that job. And every month we turn in a pay application, we have to submit backup, and we make sure we meet all of the Carolina rules as far as conditional and unconditional releases. And then once the owner funds us, we fund the subcontractors.
And I'll note everyone with the town that we've interacted with has been very cooperative and very courteous. But I just wanted to ask Mr. Cornelius, before filing this appeal, did you bring this argument forward? Did Summit bring this argument forward to the town about what we believe that the proper amount of fee would be?
We did. We asked the same question we always do in every community we build. If you how do you charge us, and how do you charge the subcontractors that come to get a privileged license or a business license in communities? And they went over it with us, and the town identified as being the full contract amount of the full 40 million, even though we're subbing all of it out, but about 2 million to other subcontractors, and they're having to pay again on their contract amounts.
Mr. Cornelius, I'll show you what's is Exhibit 3 in the book of documentation that's been presented to each council member and to Mr. Parker, and also provided to Ms. Meservey as the town clerk. Could you describe what does this attachment G, the continuation sheet, or what's the name?
It's called an AIA G702 and G703. It's a legal document for our pay applications and how the job is broken down. So the very top 3 items is insurance, overhead, and fee. And then it breaks down site work and all the things involved to build 320 apartment projects with a cost applied to each one of them. And then we turn around and we subcontract that work out. They have a pay application they turn each month that shows their total, which is part of the package we've been provided, you all been provided. And they draw down on that as the work has been performed and approved by the owner and the architect.
And so we mentioned the $40.5 million at the bottom of this, at the spreadsheet. Does that figure appear in the grand totals?
That's exactly the same amount that's in our owner contract.
Okay.
That's attached.
And so it's $40,619,557?
Yes.
And so when you look at the line items going back to the front of this document, the first page, which are the 2 items that actually are the property of Summit that you would receive?
Number 1,200 and 1,300, overhead and fee.
Okay. And so the overhead is roughly $773,000.
Yes.
And the fee is roughly
$1,160,558.
And for each other amount, there is a subcontractor that is going to receive those funds.
They have been issued a subcontract for those amounts.
And when the payments are made, those payments merely pass through Summit contractors.
That's correct. They come to us because we're ultimately responsible, and we may or may not have a bond on the job, and then we funnel that to the subcontractors within 7 days.
Mr. Cornelius, with your understanding of the law and the contracts that are applicable, do you have the right to just simply keep that money that belongs to the subcontractor?
Absolutely not. We've been breach of contract with the owner, and the subcontractors would have the ability to file a lien on the property for breach of non-payment.
And in the interest of time, we won't go into significant detail, but could you just describe what exhibit number 4 is for town council?
Number 4 is our AIA contract with the owner.
And if you go to pages, for example, 29 and 31, that's a tremendous amount of material, but are there provisions in here that you believe are significant in terms of the subcontractor-contractor relationship as it relates to the ownership funds?
Yes, on page 29, if you go to the bottom of the page, it's highlighted. It says that the contractor warrants entitled to all work covered by the application of payment will be passed to the owner no later than time of payment. The contractor failure warrants, further warrants that upon substantial of each pay application, basically saying that we're going to get paid by the owner. And if you'll flip on over to page 31, it's where it talks about that we're on 968, that we're providing payment within 7 days.
So that you are to provide payment to the subcontractor that you receive on behalf of the subcontractor within 7 days?
Yes. And they give us a conditional release when they bill us. Once they receive their money, they give us a unconditional through that date saying that they've been paid in full.
If the money is not released to the subcontractor on time, what are the subcontractor's rights to get those funds?
To file a notice of non-payment and then file a lien.
And would a normal vendor of a business have those rights in your understanding?
A normal vendor, yes.
So like a normal vendor of like someone who provides you with office supplies or something like that, do they have these same sort of lien rights?
Not if they don't deliver to the property. You have to deliver and supply material or labor on the project location.
So other provisions in here, ladies and gentlemen, there's some examples of the law from South Carolina Code that speak to liens and lien rights, and the fact that if you receive money that's designated for a subcontractor and don't pay it, it actually can be a misdemeanor if you have certified that you have made those payments. And again, these are here not to do a big legal lecture, but just to indicate that this relationship is different. These pass-through funds are not the similar types of things that an average business would pay. These literally are assembled together into a single pay application, and they are not Summit's property. They are the property of the subcontractors that appear on each pay application and appear in that schedule of values. And so to go on briefly, Mr. Cornelius, do you have an example that you believe is relevant with another municipality in the state of South Carolina?
Yes, over in Ridgeville, we just got our business license over there.
Okay. And how about the city of Malden?
And also in Malden, South Carolina, and that was around $7,000.
Okay. But initially, to your knowledge, and ladies and gentlemen, the language of the Malden ordinance I'll represent to council is the same as the relevant definition of gross income for this purpose. And it includes, as you'll see behind tab 7, that gross income for business license income tax purposes shall not include taxes collected for a governmental entity, escrow funds, or funds which are the property of a third party. And I believe that both the city of Malden and the town have the same ordinance in part because the Municipal Association of South Carolina has issued a form of ordinance that many towns have adopted. But Mr. Cornelius, if we could go a little just slightly deeper on that issue, did the city of Malden initially try to charge a fee that was based on the entire contract amount?
Yes, they did, and our licensing administrator reached back out to them, and they actually provided us an email explaining it should be only charged on our fee and overhead because they're going to charge that amount to the subcontractors.
And so did you present the argument to the city of Malden that these additional funds that are passed through should be considered the property of the subcontractors?
That is correct.
And the city of Malden accepted that?
Absolutely.
Is there anything further that you'd like to present to council before we conclude?
Yes. We love having the opportunity to work in your community, but I don't mind if I pay the fee, but my subcontractor shouldn't have to. It shouldn't be twice. It either needs to be us just on our fee and overhead, you charge the subcontractors, or we pay it all and there's no fee, privilege fee for the subcontractors, because it's the same amount. In this booklet you have a copy of our pay application that shows how much site work is. There's a copy of a pay application for the site contractor and their contract. It's exactly the same amount, and they're drawing for it, just like we're drawing for it, but we receive it and we pay them because we are hired to protect the owner's rights.
And this is a final question, Mr. Cornelius. Has Summit performed a calculation of what it believes the appropriate amount would be?
We feel like based on every other community we've ever done business in, which we're licensed in 32 states, we've been all over North and South Carolina, that we feel like are at most that the license should be $7,410.20.
Did any members of council, Mr. Councilman, would it be appropriate to have Mr. Cornelius be available for cross-examination, or what would you do?
At this point, I think what our rules of procedure, just for an appeal, just allow a presentation from each side. So I don't think I don't think that our rules allow for cross-examination. I do think that once we get to the point where council is deliberating, I think that council members would be within their rights to ask questions of anybody who presented.
Thank you. Okay. Then ladies and gentlemen of council, I appreciate your time and your attention. I know it's valuable, and thank you again for the service that you give to the town. My client considers himself to be a good corporate citizen and looks forward to building a project which will be an asset to the town of Somerville. Again, with this business license fee, which is larger than any one that they have paid, they are asking for closer analysis of the meaning of this exclusion from gross income. Again, that it should not include property or funds that are the property of third parties. We have just intended to briefly illustrate why funds that are payable to subcontractors have to be paid to them. They can't be kept. They can't be diverted. So in that sense, they are their property. So with that being said, we'd ask for town council to please consider reversing the decision of the license official and reverting that license amount to $7,410.20 and issuing a refund to Summit Contracting for the remainder. So thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the members of council may have.
Thank you, Mr. Leisman. Mr. Parker?
Please, council, I would call as my first witness, Andrew Shelton. Shelton, you state your name for me, please.
Andrew Shelton.
And tell me where you're employed and what your duties are.
I'm an employee of the town of Somerville. I'm the finance director. My duties are to oversee all financial matters for the town.
And is the business license department your responsibility and under your supervision?
Yes, sir.
And you're familiar with the business license ordinance of the town of Somerville?
Yes, sir.
Okay. How did this particular license, how did this particular ordinance come to be enacted?
Yes, sir. This particular ordinance is based on the model business license ordinance from the Municipal Association of South Carolina, better known as MASC.
And the municipal association also issue guidelines on how to interpret the model business ordinance adopted by council?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you Exhibit C, and I believe I've given Mr. Leisman a copy, and council also has a copy in their package of this particular exhibit. Can you tell me what that is?
Yes, sir. This is provided by the Municipal Association. It's their Municipal Association Business License Handbook. And this just describes gross income and how to apply it to subcontractors.
And this deals with subcontractors also?
Contractors and subcontractors, yes, sir.
And your department follows these guidelines?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And is the supervisor of the business license department, would you approve the deduction of subcontractors, estimate from subcontractors to be deducted from gross income as funds belonging to a third party?
No, sir.
Is that consistent with our ordinance and with the guidelines from the municipal association?
Yes, sir. It's based on the guidelines provided by MASC.
And Mr. Leisman and Mr. Cornelius mentioned Malden, South Carolina had reduced their business license fees. Did you contact the city of the town of Malden?
Yes.
To determine why they did that?
Yes, sir, I did.
After that contact with Malden, are you aware of any authority or any requirements that you deduct subcontractors or estimates of subcontractors as property of a third party?
No, sir. It was not based on the guidelines provided by MASC.
Thank you. This is not to be in court examination.
Thank you.
I call my second witness, Ms. Belinda Harper.
Good evening, council. Mayor.
Ms. Harper, please state your name and address for me.
Yes, my name's Belinda Harper. My address is 1 Paget Circle, Somerville, South Carolina.
And where are you currently employed?
Town of Somerville, Commissioners of Public Works.
And what is your position with the Commission for Public Works?
I'm the Deputy General Manager over Finance.
And do you hold any certifications in accounting?
Yes, I have a degree, a Bachelor of Science degree, majoring in Business Administration with an accounting major. I'm a certified public accountant. I'm a certified governmental finance officer, and I hold a certification for a master's business license official.
Tell me what you have to go through to become a certified public accountant.
Well, there's a horrible, rigorous test that you have to take that only 4% of the people pass on the first time. Thankfully, I passed half the first time, half the second time. You have to spend 2 years in public accounting, and you have to complete certain tasks within those 2 years. A lot of the work that you do is half the year you're doing auditing and half the year you're doing taxes.
In that training that you went through, did you have to have an understanding of the Internal Revenue Service Code?
Yes, in order to prepare tax returns for businesses as well as individuals.
And are you familiar with the town's business license ordinance?
Yes, sir. I was instrumental in updating it in 2017.
Let me stop you
Okay.
for a second.
Yes.
Prior to becoming finance director for the Commission for Public Works, where were you employed?
For the town of Somerville for 8 wonderful years
In what capacity were you employed?
as the finance director.
And you all oversaw the business license department also?
I was their business license official. Yes, sir.
Now, let me get back to my other question. Are you familiar with the town's business license ordinance?
Yes. February 2017, based on the Municipal Association's model ordinance, we updated that ordinance specifically to the town of Somerville.
And do you recall on what basis a business license tax is determined?
The only basis that it can be determined legally is gross receipts.
Right? And gross receipt is that equivalent to gross income?
No. No, gross receipts is all funds received by the organization without any deductions. There are exclusions, which would be sales tax, hospitality tax, or an escrow fund.
Based on your knowledge, let me back you up just one second.
Okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would move to introduce her as an expert witness. She has knowledge, training, experience to testify as an expert in accounting as it relates to business licenses.
Mr. Leisman?
Councilman McIntosh, I obviously want council to receive all the information that we believe is relevant. But I think admitting somebody as an expert witness on the content of the ordinance is never appropriate because the ordinance would speak for itself. The witness just indicated 2 of the categories, for example, for which there can be exclusions and left out the one that we're here to discuss, which is the funds that are in the property of a third party. So I certainly I would not object to the testimony, but as an expert in the ordinance, I don't think there's such a thing. I think that you all will be the experts in the ordinance and will interpret it as the appellate judges in this instance.
Mr. Parker, for what purpose are you proposing, Ms. Harper?
I want to get into the record and
For what purpose are you proposing Ms. Harper to be an expert?
to testify that our ordinance requires the tax be computed on gross income. And from that gross income, would they be allowed to deduct subcontractor fees to determine the gross income?
that speaks to the prominence of the finder of fact and determiner of appeal.
The tax
I
return.
mean, Mr. Parker, she can testify as to how she performed her duties with the town interpreting the same ordinance. I'm not sure that the question that you're asking requires an expert.
Let me rephrase the question. Ms. Harper, during your 8 years now, was anyone allowed to deduct subcontractor fees from their
No,
gross income?
and if I could elaborate on that question, this is an issue that has come up numerous times. And I know part of the appeal was based on the interpretation of the ordinance. Page 24 deals with this directly. Subcontractors, taxable. A general contractor cannot deduct the amount paid to subcontractors from gross income upon which he computes his business license tax. It further goes on to say the contractor and subcontractors are two different people or entities engaged in two different business activities. Each is subject to a business license based upon gross receipts received. The tax is levied upon the privilege of doing business, not on the income. Therefore, there is no double taxation, as it is frequently argued. Right out of your ordinance.
Answering the question, where the true cost examination? Thank you, Ms. Harper.
You're welcome.
Mr. Parker, does that conclude your fifth?
Yes, and I just wanted to make clear that the appeal that Mr. Leesman is filed, as well as my return, are part of the record. And as well as the exhibit, which, well, that's part of my return, so it's already part of the record. Yeah, with it, just one moment. You're gonna have a,
If I might, it wouldn't be a 5-minute.
okay.
Okay.
I'll be very brief also.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Councilman McIntosh, and ladies and gentlemen, I just would like to briefly touch on the last statement from the witness. There is language in the appendix that talks about general contractor and subcontractor relationship. That's correct. But when the ordinance itself, not the appendix, but when the language of the ordinance said that there's going to be an exception for funds that are the property of third parties. And that is what we're speaking of here, to be the exception that we should exclude these payments. And in that sense, we believe that the ordinance is saying something that is inconsistent with itself. There is language speaking to the general contractor subcontractor relationship, but if there's going to be an exclusion for funds that are the property of a third party, then these funds do need to be excluded. Again, we provided an example of another municipality with the exact same model ordinance that followed it in this manner with the same sort of discussion that was had. So thank you again, and thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your patience and this education in ordinances and tax appeals. But thank you again. We again would ask for that number to be revised because that $126,000 license fee is unprecedented in this company's experience and is inconsistent with an example of another municipality with the same ordinance. And thank you very much.
Council, there's just a couple of things that I wanted to point out. This is an argument about what property of funds of property of a third party means. The best interpretation of that phrase is the municipal association, who not only drafted the ordinance, model ordinance, but also drafted the guidelines. Nowhere in there do they allow deduction of subcontractor fees. And that is the best judge of what the intent of that subsection means. I would also mention, wanted to stress that our ordinance and calculation of a business license tax is available at any time. And certainly when Summit was doing their budget request, they could have gotten that fee to put it into their budget when they submitted their bid. That was on them, not on the town. Since I didn't have the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Cornelius, I think it's important as to who pays the subcontractors. Is Summit paying the subcontractors, or is Nexton paying the subcontractors? If Nexton is paying the subcontractors directly, then they don't have to include it in their gross income. But if it's going to Summit, and then Summit pays the subcontractors, then it needs to be included. So monies that are due a subcontractor, although there is a lien statute, that doesn't mean that they're going to automatically get it. They may lose because the lien provides for attorney's fees to the prevailing party. And these are estimates. We have no way to determine what the finite amounts are, like hospitality taxes or escrow funds. Those are always in the exact dollar amount. We don't have the same with the estimates for the subcontractors. And if you will look at Exhibit 7 in Mr. Leeseman's presentation from Malden, it appears to me that there were incentives involved also in that calculation. And as Mr. Shelton stated, he has no idea why they did what they did. Certainly what happened in Malden has no control over what this council does. Having said that, I will ask the council to uphold the business license official determination of $126,000.
I would just, before we start deliberation, I would just, just for point of clarification, I've read the appeal, I've read the return to appeal. I think we all have. I'm concluding that this is a matter of first impression, that there's no controlling authority, that no court in South Carolina that has any authority over us has ever ruled on this issue. Is that what I'm gathering?
I take that back. I think it's the case that I cited in my return, Old versus Town of Bruce Creek, that the Supreme Court recognized that business license taxes are calculated on gross income, which is in concert with our ordinance.
Well, I guess I was just kind of cutting to the chase. The issue before us is whether we interpret our own ordinance to mean that the property of another would apply to a contractor subcontractor relationship. Isn't that the entire issue before us? Okay. And Mr. Parker, you in your return particularly, and you mentioned it up here, and I think Ms. Harper mentioned it, you stated that a business license is not a tax on gross receipts or gross income. It's a fee for the privilege of doing business. And I think we all have some understanding of that and how the actual license fee is calculated. But can you, or do you need Ms. Harper to speak to how it's not a tax on gross receipts and how the fee itself is actually calculated?
It is not a tax on gross income. It is a measuring stick. And it's the fairest way we could use to treat everybody the same before you start deducting for subcontractors, before you start deducting for cost of goods sold, before you start deducting for materials. What Summit wants to do is to have their business license determined on net income.
I'm gonna ask Mr. Leesman, do you agree that the, a business license fee is not a tax on gross receipts? And in answering the question, I guess I'd want you to address the role of these IRS NAICS codes.
Understood, and I think that where it becomes, where the issue sort of coalesces is that exclusion, which is not an exclusion that would necessarily apply in these other contexts to my knowledge. And there are those codes that speak to the construction industry, but again, there's this issue where property of third parties is to be excluded. And so that's where we're coming in. So again, it's taxing them $126,000 when all they've done is acted as a conduit for those funds. And they don't receive those, they can't keep them. Those aren't estimates, those are contract amounts. Everything in that document is a binding contract amount. It's not an estimate. So Councilman, I don't know if I answered your question or not, but, and I know that some of those issues come up in terms of fee versus tax and the legality of it. I think that there's some wordplay that can go on there.
But aren't these IRS-based codes, these NAICS codes, don't they vary from industry to industry because they may not be, as an attorney, we sometimes argue with the codes that we have, but aren't they an attempt to determine what a normal average degree of profitability would be? I mean, isn't that what a NAICS code is? Well, I mean, I'm asking you. Okay. Okay.
Again, we're just talking about property, but we're not saying that the Councilorville is necessarily alone or an outlier, but I think this example where they're really, all their property is 1.9. The other 38.1 million is other people's property. And I think that's the point.
Well, I may have been unfair asking you about NAICS codes, but I think I can ask you this, because Mr. Parker kind of got at it a little bit. I mean, there are plenty of times when a general contractor denies a claim for payment from a subcontractor, right?
But if they're denying that claim, it would not get presented to the owner for payment. Once it's being presented to the owner for payment, it's being approved. And once that payment is received, they are contractually and legally obligated to pass that payment along. And our position is that's because it's their property. That's why they're obligated under both contract and law to pass it forward. So that's what we're really focused on, is that third exception from the category, which is, and it's special because no other industries handle their payment. If you're operating a pizza shop, you don't basically send an invoice or send a bill to someone that says, I'm passing through this amount of food costs and all these amounts, and then you only pay your food vendor when you get that amount, and it's handled completely differently. And that's why we believe that this situation calls for this exception to be applied. That's not saying it's a special case. This is just an example where that funds of the property of third party should come to light. That language is there for a reason. To read it as being superfluous or unnecessary, or that it's just to be ignored, that's never how an ordinance should be read.
Yeah, that's it. The funds that come to Summit are not the property of a subcontractor when they're given by Nexton to Summit. When Summit takes that check, it is their property. They may have an obligation to pay, but it is their property. And they have an obligation maybe to pay or maybe not to pay. The Supreme Court has said this is not a tax on income. It is an excise tax for the purpose of doing business. It's plain and simple. So,
Well, at this point, I'm just going to ask anybody on council if they have any questions for either side, or if anybody wants to start deliberations.
Just
Don't ask me.
From my understanding of GW and Mr. Leesman, you did a comparative analysis on the fee for a business license with Malden and Ridgeville.
You're doing a 40+ million project in Somerville, and they ask you to pay 126,000 and some change. But what was the size of the project in Ridgeville and Malta compared to the 40 million you're spending here?
About 41 million.
41 million in Malden. What about Ridgeville?
Ridgeville, going to end up being around 37.
Okay.
Councilman Brown, if I might just do for clarification, Ridgeville does not have a business license fee, so Malden is the one that we're really presenting as a comparator example. But I wouldn't want to leave the impression that they just don't have a business license regime.
Mr. McIntosh, since I'm not sure what true protocol is here, I'm sitting here as a jury, and I'm thinking I'm supposed to be in a jury room with the rest of the jurors talking about what we're doing. We don't have it as an executive session on the agenda, but it seems to me that that is appropriate unless there are questions from council to be answered by either side.
I guess I'd like to ask a question. When were our business fees calculated?
Business license fees are calculated whenever
No, I mean, for this project.
when they came in to get a business license, that's when it's calculated, and you calculate it based on whatever number is presented to you by the business owner.
And when was that?
I don't,
Councilman Jackson, so that was in February of this year was when the initial application was made, and so that all just happened in the last several months.
Okay.
Mr. Jenkins, to respond to you, I'm just looking at the procedures for appeals that we adopted, I think, a couple of weeks ago. In number 10, it just says this. At the conclusion of the appeal, the council member in charge of conducting appeal will call for discussion. At the conclusion of discussions and weighing the merits of the appeal, each council member will be polled. The response will be either appeal denied or appeal granted. Our procedures don't address whether we can go to executive session, but I'm just off the top of my head, I'm struggling to find an exemption to the Open Meetings Act that would allow us to. Although having said that, I've been in Mr. Leeseman's shoes, I've been in Mr. Parker's shoes, arguing in front of governmental bodies, and I've watched them run off to executive session. But I don't know what basis they had to do that. Mr. Parker, do you know of any basis that we could go into executive session to deliberate?
I mean, I really don't have any feeling one way or the other if that's what you want to do, but I don't think the Freedom of Information Act allows you to do that.
Well, that's all I needed to hear.
And I agree to it. I think that somebody in the community should really stand up and say, this didn't belong in the executive.
Nobody would ever do that in the town of Somerville, would they? He's off.
Huh?
there you go.
Okay, if I'm on mic, I'm sitting here listening to this, and I'm a contractor. And I got some real concerns about what we're talking about that I would never bring up in this meeting. So I'm not going to say a word unless we go into executive session, because I'm concerned about how I pull a permit and how my subcontractors pull a permit. So I think it's definitely a reason to go into executive session, because I'm listening to these guys talk, and I think even though I think we need to charge them every penny we can charge them, but I think we need to be darn sure legally we charging them in the right way. Because my air conditioning, heating people, my electricians, my plumbers, and all those people pull permits. And so we need to be talking this in the executive session to make sure we all on the same page. That's what I think, and I hope we are. And maybe that's what we're saying, that we're all on the same page.
Here's what I would say then. I think by our own procedures, I think we're supposed to deliberate publicly. I do think that at some point in our deliberations, if someone, if the council, someone made a motion and council voted to go in an executive session, we could, but only for the purpose of receiving legal advice. And just to point out, we would be receiving legal advice from one of the parties, one of the lawyers that has argued a position before us, but I don't think that we can deliberate, and certainly we can never vote in executive session. But so, I mean, I think we can always go in executive session to receive legal advice. It's just a little tricky in the sense that we'd be receiving legal advice from one of the attorneys representing one of the parties before us.
And what we decide here isn't binding our hands. We can discuss it and make changes in the future.
Yeah. Well, I'm willing to go in an executive session and have these guys talk to us along with GW. I mean, there's nothing hidden. It's just something we want to keep open. And then come back into open session and before we vote on something that we sorry we vote on before it's over with. So we know how we do it. And I just want to make sure we do it right. That's all I'm saying.
I'm ready to vote. I agree that it would be nice to go into executive session. I just don't think we can do it under the statutes. I think I've got a pretty complete understanding of both sides' position, and I'm ready to go ahead and make a vote on it.
Well, I'm impressed, Mr. Bailey, because I'm a little unsure how I'm going to vote, but I'll tell everybody what I guess I'm struggling with. On the face of it, you know, Mr. Leisman presents us some fairly compelling facts. On the face of it, it would seem like the same money, quote unquote, shouldn't be taxed more than once. However, and it's why I asked the question, these codes, is my understanding of these NAICS codes, these IRS codes, is that they vary wildly from profession to profession, from industry to industry. A pizza shop doesn't get taxed, doesn't have the same code under the IRS codes for profitability that an attorney does, or an accountant does, or a general contractor does. So I don't know this, but my assumption, my understanding is that the code that we base the fee on for a contractor takes into consideration that a general contractor has subcontractors that he's paying out to.
Mr. McIntosh, if you would allow me to speak, if that's okay. Do you?
Sure.
Yeah. So yes, sir. The NAICS codes and the business license codes, the different rankings that you can be in 1 through 8, those are determined based on the profitability of the business. So things like a good argument with this that I've heard over and over are car dealerships. Well, you know, a car dealership, he's holding the car. He only gets the profit from the car. Well, they still pay on their gross receipts. There's no exemption in state law, in the model business ordinance, or the town's ordinance for subcontractors to be paid differently, or for contractors to pay differently. So even though it may be a compelling argument, there is no actual exception for any of this in the state law, in the model ordinance, or in the town's codes. They're, you know, where general contractors are placed in our business license sections, it's based on their profitability. So if you're a business where you know, where the IRS knows that you have things like what you're saying, the secondary, the third party property that's being held, what your argument is, that's based, you know, you're put at a different place, at a different ranking. So you have to think of things like restaurants and gas stations. Gas station is another one. They pay on gross receipts. They don't have to, so even though they just take the gas in and then sell it, they're still paying on the gross receipts. So even though the argument may sound compelling, there's no exemption for what they're asking for in any of those rules. And I appreciate that Malden did that for you, but it's our belief that they did that in error, and that's not for us to kind of judge.
Well, the other issue, I guess, that again, sounds compelling, but I'm just not sure I can completely go there, is that these funds that are contractually obligated to be paid to a subcontractor, I mean, that is the issue. Both attorneys said it was the issue, that are these funds the property of the subcontractor? And clearly the subcontractor has a strong legal interest in those funds. I mean, the state has recognized that by giving them lien rights, but I don't believe that it is. I'm having a hard time reaching. I've been in enough construction litigation. I've seen the amounts that have actually been paid to the subcontractors dramatically reduced. Sometimes I've been representing the general and I've been happy, but a lot of times I represent subcontractors. I don't think I'm struggling to see how having a legal interest in the funds is the same thing as it being your property, because I've seen way too many times where the amount changes dramatically in the course of not just construction litigation, but just negotiations. Yeah. So
I don't disagree with anything you said or that Rebecca said, and I'm still ready to vote whenever everybody.
You're still ready to vote the other way?
I'm not saying how I'm going to vote till I vote.
I've been watching you for a while, Mr. Bailey.
I just looked at, if they came to us in February and this was settled in Malden in February, it seems like you would have had an idea that this may come about.
Councilman Jackson, we did, and we had that discussion, and we worked with the town, again, the town's cordial, they were cooperative about it, but they've stuck to their position on that. So we just, again, intended and expected and presented that argument that it would have the same result that did not, so that's why we're before you tonight.
Well, if anybody has anything else to say as far as deliberation or questions, I'd say to speak now or forever hold your peace. Otherwise, under our newly adopted procedures, I think I'm supposed to poll each one of you and ask you whether you are voting for the appeal granted or appeal denied. And to be clear, I guess, if you say appeal granted, you're siding with Mr. Leeseman and his client, Mr. Cornelius, or Summit Contracting. And if you say in response, appeal denied, then you're siding with Mr. Parker and his client. Mr. Jenkins, what?
Denied.
Mr. Bailey.
Appeal denied. I'd like to explain why I'm saying that. I don't see a legal distinction between paying for materials and supplies and paying a subcontractor. I do not believe that. I think the money belongs to the contractor until the subcontractor has performed and earned it. It may be more or less. He may have a change order and go higher. He may not comply like he should and get less, but I don't think the money belongs to the sub. I don't think the fact that the subcontractor is also subject to the business license tax, I don't think that the contractor can assert the rights of somebody else as a defense to pay it. But I feel like they're legally entitled to pay. That's my position. I mean, I would vote to deny the appeal.
Ms. Gardner-Smith.
Denied.
Mayor Waring.
Well, you all got me on the spot here. I'm going to vote to appeal just because I'm in the business that deals with this kind of stuff. But Bill just said, I run into problems where that's not absolutely true. The contractor doesn't own everything. The subcontractor does. Not the subcontractor does. And
that's the only reason I'm going to go that way. The subcontractor owns a lot of stuff that comes on. Anyway, so that's why.
Mr. Brown?
I'm going to vote to deny the appeal, and here's why. I listened to the two sides. It seems to me that, based on the municipal code, that GW side presented a more compelling argument based on what seemed to be more proof in the argument presented by GW for the town. It seems that basically this thing in dealing with contracts is more or less written in stone. And it appears that the town of Somerville is following the municipal standards, the code. And I don't know what happened in Malden or what they did or whatever, but I'm convinced that what I've heard, that our folks made the right decision.
Mr. Jackson? Deny. I will also vote for deny, but I'll say, as several other people did, I'll give you just a snapshot of my opinion, but also my reasoning, but also thank Mr. Leeseman and Mr. Parker for their presentation. There's an old saying that if the law is against you, argue the facts. If the facts are against you, argue the law. If both the facts and law are against you, call the other lawyer a son of a gun. Well, nobody called anybody any names. I appreciate that. Mr. Leeseman and his side did present, I think, some very compelling facts. I just don't think the law is on your side. So that's 6-1 with Mr. Mayor Waring in the minority.
I was on your side, a little bit more educated.
And I would then declare this appeal to be adjourned.
Okay, public comments. Anybody got any public comments?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have anyone on the sign-up sheet for an agenda item public comment.
Okay, no public comments. That's all right, you can come forward.
For agenda items only at this
Comment for
point.
the agenda.
Yeah, is this on the agenda for
It
tonight?
is on the agenda.
All
Item
right,
10I.
I'll allow you to go ahead. I'm sorry you didn't get a chance to sign up.
Well, it's a new
I'm in a
procedure.
good mood tonight, so go ahead. If you get too
Well, I'll take
long,
it.
I'll sit you down.
We'll take a deep breath and
Okay,
talk
sir.
about something else.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. My name is Peter Gorman, I'm resident of South Magnolia. I have two comments I'd like to make about the open for business proposal for capital improvements or expansion. And I'll offer these in the spirit of not so much criticism, but opportunities to improve the proposal. Similar projects at the county level have raised questions about the secrecy of the information submitted to the counties as to the improvements and the benchmarks that have been set for deciding whether a project like this, giving tax relief, is in fact a business secret or proprietary information. I think Berkeley County and several times has taken the position that this is proprietary information submitted to them. And I would suggest that we need transparency on this proposal, and it should be written into the plan and the contract, because otherwise the public will be not allowed to gauge whether these projects are successful or not. The second comment I would make is that the benchmarks for measuring success over the 5-year period annually seem to me very subjective. I know that they are based on changes in annual amounts of real estate valuation, but how do you do that and who does it? I think there would be a tendency to naturally let the business determine that amount if we are lacking clear measures ourselves on how to set those and measure those standards. The final point I'd like to make, and I think is most concerning to me as a proud owner of a 140-year-old house here on the east side of the historic district, which I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars improving and hope that it's going to be here for another 100 years, is the map for the capital improvements area. And it is, it includes some R1 residential housing, and it is literally 2 blocks from my house. And Mayor, with your approval, I'd like to offer to distribute the maps of that show the R1 areas included in the downtown commercial district map as part of this proposal.
Yes, sir.
This is page 72 in the proposal. I'm very familiar with this part of town. I know everybody who lives there. They're all residents, and they certainly do not want commercial encroachment in their neighborhood. I don't understand why these blocks are included in this map. It is zoned under your ordinance R1, strictly residential. And on the west side of Magnolia Street, yes, there is commercial law, the Shelburne law, and the new restaurant. However, on the eastern side, all the way over to Gum Street, strictly residential and mostly historic homes. And I would ask that you modify this map to exclude those areas that I've marked. And with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And we'll sure look into this too. Thank you. Okay, petitions.
Petition by Thomas M. Irvin to annex Dorchester County TMS number 136-0000105, located at 908 Central Avenue and totaling approximately 1 acre. Currently zoned CG General Commercial in Dorchester County and will be zoned GB General Business upon annexation into the town of Somerville's municipal limits. This is in Council District 1. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and made a recommendation for approval at their meeting on April 19th, 2021. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move the item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their May 10th, 2021 meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we accept the petition and give first reading to the ordinance.
I'll second.
Okay, motion made and we accept this petition. Any discussion? Carol, you got anything? I think this is your district. No discussion. All in favor signify by raising their hand, voting yes.
Yes.
Aye. Any opposed? Ayes carried. Okay, bills.
All right. Second and final reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 8, Businesses, Section 8-33, Purpose and Duration, to change the calendar end date from May 31st to April 30th.
I'll make a motion, we approve that. Second.
Okay, motion made. We approve that in a second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Likewise, ayes carried.
Second and final reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 8 Businesses, Appendix A, 8.7 NEICS 524127 Insurance Companies for Article 1, Article 2, and Article 3, so that license taxes for insurance companies shall now be due and payable on or before April 30th in each year.
I'll make a motion, we give second and final reading. I second. And approve.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Yeah, well, I just got a question. Somebody told me how this is going to affect the insurance company.
Yes, sir. This is part of the changes that the MESC And the state made, and all it does is change the deadline from the May date to the April 30th. So because it was mentioned in two different ordinances, we had to amend it in two different ordinances.
Changes the date, and that's all. Okay, all in favor of this, signify by raising the right hand, saying yes. Aye, yes. All opposed? Likewise, ayes carry.
Second and final reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 16 Offenses and Miscellaneous Provisions, Article 1 in general, by adding a new Section 16-18 Home Detention to provide for a home detention program as an alternative to incarceration in certain cases in the town of Somerville.
Mr. Mayor, I'd move second and final reading.
Vote second on this.
Vote second. Okay,
Mr.
motion
Mayor,
made.
I have a motion to amend on that,
Okay,
that in paragraph 2, we strike "and non-electric." This is an issue I raised last month, and I asked that to be withdrawn until Mr. Parker could research whether or not it would be mandatory to have that option between electronic, non-electronic monitoring. It's my understanding from talking to Mr. Parker that he's checked into it, and there's no prohibition on just requiring electronic monitoring. So I would again make a motion that we restrict this to electronic monitoring only by dropping "and non-electric" from item paragraph 2.
I'll second that.
yes, sir. Mr. Parker.
Mayor is correct. Actually, Judge Jameson had drafted this ordinance, and it indicated that the Supreme Court had issued an order that you had to have both home detention and electronic detention. There is no such order that anybody can find. So we're free to do. I don't think there's any prohibition against it whatsoever. An additional paragraph was added, and I'm not sure if it's the one you have before town, but I want to recognize electronic monitoring.
I think the version in the package we got had electronic and non-electronic. So that was. Yeah, I'm not doing non-electronic. Okay.
There was a paragraph, new paragraph 4, electronic monitoring shall be the only form of home detention used by the municipal court of the town of Somerville. And the defendant shall be responsible for associated costs. And in the talking about in paragraph 2, the home detention was deleted and it's just electronic home detention now.
Well, and that begs the question. I think that we gave first reading to an ordinance that didn't have that in it. I don't know how it can change between first reading and second reading unless we vote to change it. So, I mean, I think Mr. Bailey's motion is in order, whether you agree with it or not. The only thing that can change an ordinance between, a proposed ordinance between first reading and second reading is a vote of council.
Well, does that mean that when somebody's sentenced to that, they have to be in home detention?
My understanding is this is just for people that have been released on bond.
Right, I understand that,
Okay.
but they gotta be home detention, like you said before, Walter.
Yeah, they have to wear a monitor, electronic monitor.
Right.
Otherwise, there's no way to control whether they're compliant or not.
Yeah.
Well, I think what we're talking about is if they're on home detention and they're not being monitored at all, I mean, they can
Yeah, you may as well let them,
get around the neighborhood, and, you know. So if your
amendment, that means that they're monitored by.
Yes.
yeah, they need to be monitored, that's all.
Okay.
They're still in home detention, but they gotta be monitored.
Right.
Did you get a
Okay.
second?
Okay.
All right, you got that's a motion to second. All right, all in favor of that, signify by raising right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Ayes carry. Okay.
Now you gotta vote on the amended ordinance.
Okay, now we need to vote on the amendment. All right,
On
we
the,
got a motion, second on the
on the
amendment, right?
ordinance.
Yeah, on the actual ordinance.
Huh? Okay, all in favor of this, signify by raising right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, ayes carry. Okay, Ms. Beth, introduction of bills and resolutions.
First reading of an ordinance to adopt an operating budget for the town of Somerville, South Carolina for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2021 and ending June 30th, 2022.
Make a motion, we approve first reading.
I'll second.
Motion made that we approve the budget for this coming year, and a motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote for, to have first reading, but I think at some point, between now and second reading, I'd like to have someone make a case for the several of the proposed new positions, the Assistant Project Manager for Parks and Recreation, Planner 1, Network Administrator, those three. I don't think we've, heard the reason for the new hires. I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't do it. I just don't know enough about it.
And Mr. Mayor, I'm also going to vote to give first reading to the budget. I was not able to attend the budget retreat. I was in trial. I am not really commenting at this point on any of those individual positions. I'm just going to reiterate a position that I've taken over and over again, is that it is my opinion that administratively, that our town hall administrative staff has been growing at a rate that is just simply unsustainable and unnecessary. When I look at new positions to fund, I'm gonna look first at the police department. After the police department, I'm gonna look at the fire department. I'm not gonna look at anything else until after we've looked at the police and the fire department. That's how Mr. Berlin Myers did it, and that's how I do it. And in the 10 years I've been on council, it just seems like the size of our staff within town hall, not at the fire stations, not in the police department, has been exploding. So I would like to hear those justifications as well.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask, would you guys like to have another retreat? Or I've called each of you, and but how would you like that?
I just would like for us to stop hiring as many people within town hall.
Well, Mr. Bailey, how would you like that interaction to happen?
It could happen prior to second reading at our next meeting, or if we have a special meeting in the meantime, add that to the agenda.
Okay.
Does that work for everybody else?
Well, if you'd like to set up a time and come talk to me, I'm happy to, or I can come talk to you at some point. I've tried to call everybody today or speak with everyone. So if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer.
What was your concern, Bill? About what?
It's not a specific concern necessarily to these positions. I've watched, I'm not going to get into it here. I've watched one position turn into two positions over and over again over the last 10 years. I've actually seen situations where one position turns into three positions. And I just think if we're going to fund three new positions, I'm going to look first to the police department. And if the police department doesn't need three new positions or those three positions, I'm going to go to the fire department. I mean, there's a priority level here that I think we're just missing.
The police department is getting 5 new positions, and the fire department's getting 3 new positions, just for public.
I think what we need to do is have another meeting. I really do, because we all didn't get to make the retreat, and at the retreat we didn't break things down. We had a great retreat, but we didn't break things down. So that'll be something good, Rebecca. Let's set up something.
Yeah,
before
this is the smoothest it's ever gone. From when I
Yeah,
started on
yeah.
council, spending 4 days at the Omni Hotel.
Yeah.
Never heard anybody complain about that, Mr. Jackson.
Me and Howard Bridgman did it.
Yeah, we had a good retreat, and I don't think there's anything that we can't handle in a day or something. We got to meet right here, so we can do that. Okay, so we can have a first reading. Does somebody make a motion?
We got a motion and a second.
Yeah, motion made and seconded. We have first reading to adopt the budget. It's a balanced budget for next year. All in favor of that, signify by raising the right hand, saying yes.
Aye.
Opposed? Likewise. Motion carried. Okay, Ms. Beth.
First reading of an ordinance to amend Chapter 14, Fire Prevention and Protection, to change the chapter title to Public Safety.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, Any discussion on this?
Mr. Mayor, I would just, since I kind of was behind these changes, and I'll just speak to all, I guess there are 4 different ordinances, the way it got broken down. We have a, we have a code section on fire prevention and protection that establishes a fire department and how we hire a fire chief and how the fire chief, what the fire chief's authority as to his firefighters are. And it kind of shocked me that we have no such corresponding ordinances for the police department. I know we used to have it in our ordinances because I have the 1948 ordinance book. And at the time in 1948, we had a town marshal, and that was, I think his name was probably Waring, but that was the police department, the town marshal. Somewhere along the way, we don't have anything in our ordinances establishing a police department or how we hire a police chief or what the police chief's responsibilities or authority is vis-a-vis the police officers. So these four ordinance amendments are designed to correct that.
Yeah, what that was, Bill, is, and I can't remember the year we did that, but you know, it was always a fire department chapter in the ordinance, and it never was a police department. But it was always a fire department committee.
Right.
In the ordinance, and there was a police department committee because the police department fell directly under the mayor.
In one of these ordinances, I believe it's I believe it's the third of the ordinances actually changes the name of the committee to reflect what we call it today, which is the Public Safety Committee.
Right. And so they changed it where there would be only one committee, the Public Safety Committee, because there was a fire committee and a police committee. And Stanley Tucker was the chairman of the Public Fire Committee, and Tom Finucane was chairman of the Police Committee. And of course, each of them had a little thing under their reading is in the in the ordinance. And basically it said the same thing. But it was a little bit different in the fire committee because it had to deal with the 1% fund, which came down from the state. There was no question what had to be done there because of state law. And police, there was no state law. So, the town just wrote it up. But, I think you read that and understand what goes on there. But that's fine how we write that up. I mean, I think we ought to do, I agree with you. I think we ought to do the same thing with each one. We ought to appoint the council, ought to appoint the police chief. The police chief ought to appoint his assistant chiefs and everybody that works for him. We ought not have anything to do with that. And that's just basically what it ought to be. We need to approve the positions, and he needs to hire the people, and they're working at his pleasure.
Well, these ordinance amendments would simply reflect what we're already doing.
Do what?
These ordinance amendments would simply reflect what we're already doing.
Right, that's right. So, we don't need to get involved in who the police chief or the fire chief hires or fires.
And that's what the ordinance says.
All we ought to do is approve the police chief and the fire chief. And that's what you really meant, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so that's what I thought. So I think we're fine with that.
Well, yeah, the reason we're making this change too is make it more uniform. When you read 14 as it is right now, the ordinance speaks about the fire department. It doesn't speak really about the police.
That's right, right,
So
right.
what we're trying to do is make it apply to the fire and the police in the same way.
Right. It is both the same, yeah. So nobody's got any questions about that. We have a motion to
I think we have
Right.
a first, a motion and a second for the first ordinance, which is amending the title, chapter title. Why don't we vote on this and try to do the other three at once?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Okay, all right. Yeah, that's
We'll
all.
vote on the first one and do the last three together. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, all in favor. Well, we got a motion.
We do.
Okay, motion and second. Okay, all in favor, signify by raising your right hand, vote yes.
Aye.
Okay,
Mr.
opposed likewise?
Mr. Mayor, if appropriate, I would move that we give first reading to the second, third, and fourth amendments to Chapter 14 collectively as one vote.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of this, signify by raising your right hand, voting yes.
Aye.
Okay, opposed likewise? Okay, ayes carried. Okay,
First reading of an ordinance to authorize the mayor or town administrator to execute a quitclaim deed to Mary Jo Swanson for all that certain piece, parcel, or lot of land, a .11 acre of land lying adjacent to South Laurel Street and TMS number 13706080009, shown as parcel A in square 24 on Detmold's plan in Somerville.
Motion to approve. Second.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question of staff on this before we vote? Is this, I guess it's you, Russ. Ms. Swanson, I assume, is an adjacent property owner, it says, to this .11 acre. Is there, are there any other adjacent property owners?
Yes, sir. If you look at the exhibit there, Ms. Swanson is to the left of the ditch. She owns that part to the left, and the next item on the agenda is the Balls, and they own the property to the right of the ditch. So what we've done is basically, that Ball has already subdivided this piece into parcel A and B. We're giving each one their side.
So each adjacent property owner would be quitclaim .11 acres or?
No, sir. Parcel A is .11 acres. Parcel B across the ditch on the right side is .28 acres. I've spoken to both property owners. They're fine with basically making the ditch the property line.
So the other property owners are not upset?
No, they're both agreeable to what we're trying to do.
Okay, any other questions? All right, is that a motion?
I think it's a motion.
Yeah, I think it's already.
Okay, all right. All in favor? Raise your right hand, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise? Ayes carried. Ms. Beth?
Sorry. First reading of an ordinance to authorize the mayor or town administrator to execute a quitclaim deed to Bernice G. Ball, a life estate, for all that certain piece, parcel, or lot of land, a .28 acre of land lying adjacent to South Laurel Street and TMS number 13706080003, shown as parcel B in square 24 on Detmold's plan in Somerville.
Motion to approve first reading.
Second.
I've got a motion to amend, Mr. Mayor. I talked to Mr. Parker beforehand, and I think that he's got a different version of the quitclaim deed. In regard to the life estate, the way it's characterized here.
Yes, actually, that deed was sent over by Bill Hearn, and for some reason, originally just had Bernice Ball, a life estate. I pulled the deed, and the deed was to Mr. Ball. I can't remember his first name, was Judy Nesta, maybe.
Yes.
Was the other party with the life estate remaining to Mrs. Bernice Ball. So I changed the language to conform to the actual deed that's recorded.
That would be my motion to change the one we got in the package, what Mr. Parker just read.
I'll certainly second your motion to amend the quitclaim to reflect the actual ownership.
It was Bruce C. Ball and Judy A. Nesta, subject to the life estate of Mrs. Bernice.
Brother and sister.
That's Ms. Ball's two children.
I know both of them. Brother and sister. Okay. All menu. All right. Yeah. We're voting on the amendment first, the original?
Yeah.
Amendment, okay. All in favor of this, signify by raising right hand, saying aye.
Aye. Mr.
Opposed
Mayor,
likewise.
Mr. Mayor, I also have the same question for For Mr. Cornett, it's the same question. Obviously, this property, whoever it's owned by, this adjacent landowner, it's adjacent to the 0.28 acres. Are there other property owners that are also adjacent to the 0.28 acres?
No, sir.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed likewise.
First reading of an ordinance to rezone TMS number 13600000117, located at 123 Harvest Way, approximately 4.97 acres and owned by William H. and Laura Ashley White, from PUD, Planned Development District, to GR2 General Residential. This is in Council District 4. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and made a recommendation for approval at their meeting on April 19th, 2021. Planning and Development Committee voted to move the item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their May 10th meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I would move first reading of the ordinance.
Second. Motion made and second. Any questions?
I would just say we get a lot of rezoning requests, and they're sometimes very difficult. This one is probably the easiest rezoning request I've ever voted on. This particular 4 or 5 acre property under its PUD, I think could have gotten 40 multifamily units, but the rezoning, I think they would probably max out at 6 or 7 single family residents. But my understanding is that the intention is to build 1 single family residence. So I'll take that over 40 units.
That's right. All right. All in favor of this, signify by raising your right hand, voting aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Ayes carried.
First reading of an ordinance to authorize and establish the Somerville Open for Business program to encourage economic development and private investment in the town of Somerville, South Carolina, and other matters related thereto. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move this item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their meeting on May 10th, 2021.
Motion to approve first reading.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would like Mr. Lyle to, I have a few questions about it that I'd like to ask him about.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council.
So I just have a few questions, just make sure I understand what this is.
Sure.
Is this ordinance, was this previously presented to council?
In a slightly different format. It's been amended since the initial presentation back in November of 2019.
Okay, what was the nature of the amendments?
It added a commercial revitalization element to address providing incentives for existing businesses to improve their exterior or interior appearance primarily.
Okay.
We also added specific maps so that the incentive areas were clearly defined.
Okay, and if a commercial development comes in and it's not in one of these incentive areas, then it would not be eligible for any fund, for any
That's correct.
incentives, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. On page 4, when you set out the criteria for the different categories of businesses that are entitled to apply for the incentives, item I is other uses as may be determined by town council which carry out the intent of this article and are consistent with the town's strategic planning documents. That basically generalizes all the specific language above that, does it not? That you can ask for the incentive for any reason approved by town council.
A company can apply. We ideally would like them to be one of A through H. If they are applying for something outside of A through H, then it would be up to the council to make a determination that that somehow advanced the town's strategic vision with regard to economic development. Doesn't allow them to apply for incentives in areas outside of the defined incentive areas.
Okay.
But if someone has a commercial development proposal that doesn't fit neatly into A through H, and the council is willing to consider it, that is an option.
Okay. On page 5 of the ordinance, under item section 20-2083, it is it the intent to, if council approves an incentive to actually pass an ordinance, or would it be for each incentive, you'd want an ordinance,
It would
first and
be an
second reading?
incentive to approve the, an ordinance, pardon me, to approve the incentive agreement.
Okay. Okay, and as far as the commercial development incentives, it would not be available for any business that was investing less than $1 million, is that correct?
That is correct.
And,
The commercial revitalization incentive would be available.
Yeah, the commercial revitalization incentive would allow for reimbursement grants to owners of commercially zoned properties
Okay.
within the town of Somerville for amounts as small as $500.
I understand that, but what we're talking about now is
The development piece.
the development incentives of $1 million.
That is correct.
All right, sir. And during that incentive period, let me ask you this. Looking at the top of page 7, for proposed developments with a capital investment of at least $1 million, but less than $10 million, the town may rebate up to 25% of taxes and fees paid during the incentive period. What fees would that encompass?
That would include impact fees and permitting fees.
Okay. Okay, and when these businesses, $1 million businesses, get their rebates, they're still getting services from the town. Is that correct?
Yes, they are.
And who pays for those services that are being rebated to these millionaires?
I don't know that all of them are billionaires, but those services are paid for by the citizens of Somerville.
Okay. And including other businesses
That is
may be in
correct.
competition with these people.
That is correct.
In the paragraph at the middle of page 7, in addition to the rebate percentages and thresholds described above, the town council, under the terms of any incentive agreement, may offer further incentives as they may determine based upon the amount of capital investment or type of development made or proposed to be made by the incentive recipient. So again, that would open the incentives up to anything council wants to do above and beyond or in addition to these other rebates, 25%, 35%, or 50%, depending on the investment. Is that
It
correct?
would provide the council with flexibility to, if there were a proposal that they felt merited it, go beyond.
So
Yes.
the council could, under the auspices of this agreement, give any incentive the council decided to give at any given time.
In terms of the-
Total rebate of all taxes for 5 years. I mean, not saying we'd do it, but we would
Right.
have that option to do it.
If council chose to do that for a particular project, yes, that would be within their purview.
Now, on your revitalization incentives, you've got different programs, facade programs, sign programs, and all of that. In the bottom of page 8, under item 20-211-3A, if a request is less than $2,500, then the economic development coordinator would recommend it and be approved by the town administrator. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's what we
So
propose.
town council would have no involvement in deciding who got that incentive,
For that amount of money, yes.
that amount of money. And then the next paragraph says that if anybody requests more than $2,500 in reimbursement under a single revitalization program or more than $5,000 in cumulative, then the town council would be the entity to decide whether or not they would get that or not. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Don't all of the, under 20-210, don't all of these programs here, the facade program, sign program, design assistance program, the interior upfit and maintenance program, and the historic building maintenance program, Aren't all of them limited to amounts less than $2,500?
For the individual program, yes. There is no restriction placed on what an applicant can apply for in terms of total program participation.
Okay. What if an applicant applied for, say, $2,500 for one item and later $2,500 for another item? That would still be subject to staff approval and not council?
If it's less than 5,000 in cumulative reimbursement, then under the proposed ordinance, that would fall under the town administrator.
And only when the cumulative amount is over $5,000 would the town council get involved in that?
Yes, sir.
So what is the total amount of incentives that you could give out as a staff person, subject to the administrator approving that, without council approval? Is there any limit on it, assuming you had numerous people applying?
Absolutely. The limit would be based on what council appropriates through the annual budget process for the commercial revitalization fund.
Whose decision was it to leave council out of that approval process?
This was what we developed in consultation with Mr. Parker and Lawrence Flynn, who was our outside counsel on this particular ordinance.
No, you had to talk to an outside attorney. You didn't speak to Mr. Parker?
Yes, Mr. Parker was involved in those conversations.
All right. Okay, thank you. That's all I have to say.
Yes, sir.
Michael, I've got a question for you. I think this is a good program. We're incentivizing businesses to come to Somerville and hopefully boost the economy by creating jobs and all of that. Is there anything in this program that would reward or induce businesses that come to town and say build affordable housing or something like that?
That is certainly something that council could consider. It's not identified as one of the specific targets.
Yeah.
It's not identified as one of the specific targets in the ordinance, but that under the flexibility that we discussed with Mr. Bailey is something council could certainly consider.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking, it would be a way to kill two birds with one stone. We know that we are approaching a serious affordable housing problem.
Yes.
And if we're going to incentivize businesses to come to Somerville, maybe that's something we can take a look at. And,
certainly.
Yeah. That's all I have.
Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to the ordinance. I would move that we amend the downtown commercial district map. And presently, the map has a eastern border for the downtown commercial district as South Gum and a southern border as East Richardson. My amendment would move the eastern border to, I guess, the middle of the road on South Magnolia, and the southern border to the middle of the road on East Doty, extending past East Doty in a direct line to the Berlin G. Myers Parkway. I just don't think we should be incentivizing businesses to come into a residential neighborhood.
I'll second.
Was that a motion, Bill?
That is a motion and a second.
Okay, and a second, yeah. Any discussion on that? Not all in favor, signify by raising right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise.
And Mr. Mayor, I don't have a motion to amend at first reading. If it gets to second reading, and I assume it will, I believe I noticed on the map, and this may even be a different ordinance, there was a map of a north, I don't know what it's called, but it included Nexton. And I may have been looking at it wrong, but I looked at it until my eyes hurt. The map appeared to show a good bit of Nexton, including the Nexton Square development already in the town. If I'm looking at that wrong, I'll just ignore me. But if I'm right, it'd be nice to have the map accurate before second reading, because I mean, the whole idea, in my view, the only reason to do any of this stuff is to try to incentivize already zoned and already developed or developing commercial areas that are not in the town to come into the town. But so we want to get the map right. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. McIntosh, thank you. Yeah, we did draw the lines deliberately that way with the idea that as we work with Nexton to bring more of Nexton into the town of Somerville, they would already be in a position, if there were commercial development to occur, that would meet the qualifications of this ordinance. We didn't then have to come back and amend the ordinance further.
Right. I'm not talking about the boundaries of the district, because within those different districts, the maps show properties already in town and and properties that are not in town. My review of that particular district is the map's pretty wildly inaccurate.
I agree with you, Bill. I saw that too. And I think that Michael, if we got a map, if we've been given a map, what we need to be shown is what's in town is in town.
Sure.
And of course, we didn't know, I mean, we did know, thank goodness, that wasn't in town. I understood what you were doing, which is a great idea. But any map that we're thrown at ought to be drawn. What's in town is in town.
Okay.
And what's not in town is not in town. And then we got that when we looking at it, you know, by the way, I was tickled to death to see that drawn in town, because I said, well, maybe you did something overnight that I didn't know about. And I thought that was really
it wasn't an attempt to claim any new land, I promise.
Yeah,
We'll
that's right.
certainly, we'll work on amending that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your work on this and all. Between now and second reading, I'd like to see a mechanism that council gets notified at a minimum of where everything is going. Because at $5,000 a pop, you do whatever. I'd like to know where that's being done.
Well, I think we may want to look at that in a little bit greater detail as to how we look at that. My understanding was, I appreciate Mr. Bailey's detail in this, was that any incentive was going to be approved by town council, and I still believe that's a better position for us to be in. And I believe if we're going to do this, and I don't think we should be doing it, but I think if we do it, I don't see any reason not to say that any commercial area would be eligible to do it. At least you wouldn't have an unfairness angle, but not only between people that are supporting the incentive with their tax dollars and people that are getting it, but then you've got a disparity between people that happen to fall within certain districts, where against people that want to do commercial development in a part of town that's not in those districts. I don't get the rationale for doing that. It seems another way to create a disparity.
Mr. Bailey, I believe that there's something in part of the state law that allows us to do that, that does encourage you to have priority investment areas, so you're not just saying it's the entire town. But
I'm not sure priority investment areas would apply to this.
You know what I mean? It's not a priority area for us to pay attention to. But we'll get something from GW and them to discuss that, because there was we talked about it. That's why poor Michael had to go through the action of getting all the maps together. I think there was a reason and something.
I don't really get why we're going to that effort, making something that's
I think it's
fairly simple.
I think it's required or suggested.
Pretty complicated.
Or heavily suggested.
Who's suggesting?
I'll get that too.
Okay, thank you. I will be voting against it, Mr. Mayor, just for the reason I've stated previously, that I don't think town taxpayers ought to be buying somebody's private property roof.
I agree with you, Walter, 100%. And I think that, you know, if we're getting ready to make some kind of deal with somebody about bringing something into town, that we ought to not wake up on a Monday morning and find out we got a bunch of mad people because something was done and we don't know anything about it, because poor Rebecca signed something and we don't know anything about it. And I know that won't happen because she'd let us know.
Yes, sir. It wouldn't pertain to annexations.
Yeah, it wouldn't. I know that wouldn't happen with her sitting in that seat, but I think that, you know, it ought to go before town council. And that's just a way that, you know, we're I hate to sound like Bill, but we are a council form of government, and some things as big as, you know, I'm for this incentive, 100%. Walter's really not. But I'm for this incentive, but I think council ought to be making the decisions. And I've said that, you know, that I'm for the incentives, but bring the incentives back to us and we'll decide whether or not we can do it.
Yes, sir.
Because every constituent out there is looking at us. And
Absolutely.
so that's the only thing I'm saying. And I think that's one thing Walter's saying, you know, he's not for it any kind of way, but, you know, if we can kind of get him to lean this way, it's going to be because he's going to be a decision maker and whatever incentive we decide to give the
Yes, sir.
the outsider when they're coming into town.
And-
And
yes,
I
sir.
agree with what Bob's saying too. He wants to know what's coming down the pipeline, you know.
Absolutely.
And, you
And to be
know,
clear, the commercial development component, anything that is suggested or recommended for an incentive after the application process automatically comes back to council because only council can
Right.
approve that incentive agreement. And there is a lot of transparency involved in that process because it's something that council has to consider and approve in open session.
Right,
On the
right.
revitalization side, I've heard the message, we'll go back and we'll delete the section that authorizes town staff in any capacity to make approval of those things.
And the only way we can learn is to keep doing what you're doing right now, is communicating back and forth. You let us know what you think, we'll tell us what we think. And, you know, and in
Yes,
the
sir.
end, we'll work it out. We're not gonna get mad at one another, let's work it out, you know?
You got it.
And in the end, we'll win. And we got some good stuff going on right now. I know that. Bob, some of it's in your district. Right now, we just found out yesterday, or the day before yesterday, didn't we? So, you know, it'll be passed on real quick. So, you know,
Mr. Mayor, if I could, one of the things we talked about, we don't really have an economic development committee of council. So we've been sending things through the planning development, which is perfectly fine. But if that, just as your thought process, if you wanted to establish another committee to review all of these too before they come to council, just to aid the whole group, or if you wanted it to be the finance committee, just thinking logistically, you know, y'all know how my brain works, how you would want us to bring them to you. So not an answer I need right now, but just a thought process so that, you know, it goes, how it moves through council and how you guys get it the way that you would like to get it. So
I'm happy
Good
with it
idea.
coming
direct to the
through
whole-
planning. That puts 7 more eyes and brains on it,
Yeah.
more transparent. And then just come to the development committee.
But it does not go through the planning commission. It would not go through the planning commission. It would just go through the planning and development committee. It's planning development, not PDD, right now.
that suits you, right? That suits you.
Yeah.
That's Bill's committee. I mean, Bill, that suits you, right?
I mean, I do think that the committee does more than simply planning. It's called the Planning and Development Committee. You could, the same, assuming that this ordinance passes, I mean, it's going to have a financial component to it as well. It could go to planning and development. It could go to finance. I don't think the solution is more committees.
We can make it work. We work together, we can make everything work. Okay, do we have a motion on the floor of any kind?
We've got a motion and a second for the amendment,
Did we not vote on
correct?
it? I thought we voted on the amendment.
You voted on the amendment? Okay, sorry.
Okay, what else we got?
So then we need a motion and a second on the actual, or you have a motion and a second on the ordinance. Now we need to vote on the actual ordinance as amended.
Okay, so,
I'll make a motion, we
We got a vote.
approve the ordinance as amended. I'll second.
okay, motion made and seconded on the ordinance as amended. All in favor of this signify by raising your hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Walter opposes. Anybody else opposed? Bill, you oppose?
Nay.
It's Walter. Okay. All right, where are we at now? And this is a long meeting.
First reading of an ordinance to establish a business license tax incentive program to encourage business development and expansion in the town of Somerville, South Carolina, amending the town's code of ordinances to incorporate such amendments and other matters related thereto. The Planning and Development Committee voted to move this item to full council with a recommendation for approval at their meeting on May 10th, 2021.
I'll make a motion that we approve this. Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Do we approve this? Any discussion?
Sir, I have a couple questions of our economic development.
Go ahead, sir.
Sir, unlike the previous ordinance that we considered, if the business wanted to qualify for the business license rebate and they met certain criteria, they would be automatically entitled to get that without approval of council. Is that correct?
No, this would still come to council. Ultimately, everything that we're proposing will come to council
Okay,
for approval.
Can you point, I must have missed it, can you point out on here where it says council needs to approve this? Yeah. Yeah, I'm talking about this,
I think it says it. I think it says that it requires an incentive agreement, and the incentive agreement, as established by the last ordinance you approved, requires approval by council.
Can you show me where that is in the ordinance? Again, I must have missed it.
Yeah. I feel like I highlighted it, but I can't find it.
I'll make a motion to amend it to say that it needs approved by council.
I don't see it either. I don't know if we somehow just lost it in an edit because we did end up running this thing back and forth a couple of times, but we can certainly add that specific language back in because that was in the original proposal that we brought to council back in January of last year through the Planning and Development Committee.
Okay, thank you. I did not see it either, so
Yeah,
I'm
thank
assuming
you.
it's not in here.
I appreciate you catching that.
Do we need to amend it so that it gets in there? Or do you just want to go on? Because this is first reading.
Yeah, but if you want to make a motion to amend to add that to it, I'll
I'll make a
second that.
motion to amend. Just move along.
All right.
Okay, motion to amend the ordinance to add that in a second. Any discussion on that? Okay, if not, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion carried.
See if I had anything else. That was the main thing I wanted. Like, well, let me see if I had something else in there. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I did recognize on page 4, we just mentioned Dorchester County, and because we're in all 3 counties, we've got to mention Dorchester County and the Dorchester County's Forfeit Land Commission and all of that, so we will have to add that. We're also used to 1 county, but as a mayor and I determined this week, there's only 3 towns in the state that are in 3 counties, and we're fortunately or unfortunately one of those.
Okay, we need to add that in the motion. In the original motion. All right. Okay, so we got to go back. We got to vote on the original motion now, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, we will vote on the original motion. All in favor of the original motion, signify by raising the hand and saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, who voted no? Alton Bill, okay. Motion carried. Okay, where are we at?
Consideration of donation of Saul Alexander playground equipment to Alston Middle School and the Alston Heritage Group.
I'll make a motion that we approve that.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'm in favor of doing this. I'm not exactly sure how we left this last time. I just want to make sure that whatever equipment we give, in whatever fashion and however it is stored, that the town in no way, shape, or form for this equipment that Amy has told us is not compliant, that we have no liability for that equipment.
Yeah, I think.
I don't mind giving it, nothing to do with that. I just don't want us to have any liability for it. And I'd like to make sure that GW make sure that we have something in the gifting process that clarifies that.
Yeah, the last.
Particular
We talked about
item.
it in the committee. That's what we talked about,
Yes.
getting a waiver, that our town attorney would drop a waiver to make sure that the town has no liability, so.
GW, you can take care of that, right?
Right.
GW. You take care of that. We don't have any liability once we get this. Okay. All right. Who made the motion?
I did. I'll make the
We got a motion, a second. Okay. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand, voting aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise, motion carried. Okay.
Consideration of approval of the 2021 CDBG Annual Action Plan.
I'll make a motion to approve that. I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yes. So I have there's a disparity between what the action plan says and what we're actually going to be doing as far as the housing. On page 27, the action plan says that there'll be 2 units that will be rehabbed with existing units. And then what we're actually doing is a system to single-family habitat houses. I'm sorry, it does say rehab. I was under the impression that this would be 2 houses that are being built before I read this. Can I get some clarification on that? It was $40-some thousand, I think.
Yes, sir. That's HUD narratives. HUD classifies building of the new houses or rehab. It's just a HUD definition.
Okay,
That's
but it will actually be
correct.
new
They're
houses, not rehab.
correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, we got a motion, a second. All in favor, signify by raising your right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, ayes carried.
I'm voting no.
61.
Oh, Mr. Bailey, Mr. Well. Okay, C.
Consideration of a license agreement with the Office of the Adjutant General for the use of the property adjacent to the Jerry Blackwell Sports Complex.
I make a motion that we do this, Mr. Mayor.
I'll second. Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
I think, talk to Amy, this is just gonna give us a larger area to, all parks and recreation. So I think it's a pretty good deal for us.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Okay, all in favor of this, signify by raising your right hand, voting aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise? Ayes carried. Okay, any public comments open up concerning this agenda?
Yes, sir. I have, before we start, our timer is broken, so if I may take time on my phone and call whenever 5 minutes is over. Linda Saylor.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, residents. I have a couple of items. I'm representing 2 organizations this evening, Somerville Juneteenth and Best Friends of Low Country Transit. And I appreciate all of your hard work and all your votes. Juneteenth, the holiday that recognizes the freedom of slaves, is quickly approaching us. And I did send a few letters out to the council and made a few calls. Is there anything that I need to do to help write or submit for the issuing of the proclamation for the month of June? Is there anything I need to do since I'm making that proposal that the town of Somerville recognize the state holiday, Juneteenth? And there are sample proclamations in the city of Georgetown on Senator Tim Scott's page and Congressman Clyburn's page, if you need any further reference on that. So if there's anything I need to do, you can reach out to me, and I'm available. So that's one item. Number two, I keep hearing that economic development is crucial. It's not just crucial to Somerville, it's crucial to our nation, to our world. And for the last 3 years or so, we've been knocking on the doors of businesses and knocking on the doors of residents about transportation. And we were very excited, very happy that we were going to be included in the transportation plan for the town of Somerville. And then all of a sudden, we hear that there was a vote that Somerville's not going to be included, that the mass transit or the rapid transit line would begin at Ladson, and we would totally be out the plan. We have here some residents here that are elderly, that's been paying taxes for maybe 80, close to 90 years. We have representatives who are legally blind. Some people might have in their family a teenager that doesn't have a driver's license. So I would like to know, how did they change that? Did the town of Somerville, did they support the transit proposal plan with the Council of Government? What happened? Because we're left out now. This is my granddaughter. She doesn't have a license. You know, learning how to ride a bus, that's a life skill. Okay, and we want to see our future learn these life skills. We want to see economic development. When the transportation, if it's included in Somerville, people will be shopping. More people will be coming to shop. That means money will be flourishing, more money, more and more money. So what was the story? Why aren't we in that plan? That's my question. And that's all I have to ask. Thank you.
Sailor, why weren't we in that plan? Is we didn't complete the qualifications to get in that plan. And we don't know what those qualifications were, but I can tell you one thing. I only been mayor 1 year and 4 months. But I can tell you the people before me and these people that are sitting up here that's been on council fought like the devil to get in that plan. But we didn't make it, and we didn't have the choice of knowing what qualifications that we had to do to get in that plan. But I can assure you we tried our best. Somerville tried their best to get in that plan. Because it's just people just like you and me and all these people sitting up here, we wanted to get in that plan. And we failed. But you know, we tried, your elected officials tried their best. So all I can tell you is that you keep fighting and you keep coming here and you keep standing at that podium and you keep doing what you did tonight. You know, you're not offending us by coming here and telling us what you want. And we'll keep fighting for you because we want what you want, the same thing. We all in Somerville together. Just one big happy group, hopefully fighting together. And you won't offend us at all because we will keep fighting for you because we want what you want. We want that bus system too. We want to ride too. I mean, I know I got family that wants to ride that bus system, and I'm sorry it didn't work because right up to the end when Mr. Jenkins down there and I sat upstairs in this meeting and we heard him tell it wasn't going to come here, that was heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking, but we didn't have anything to do with it. You know, we just got told it wasn't coming and there wasn't anything we could do about it. But you know, maybe in a year after it gets open, because I don't know when it's even going to start. You know, I've heard 5 years, 6 years, you know, when I might be dead and gone before it starts. But you know what? It'll come. And it'll come to Somerville because I think we've got leadership here. And when it does come, maybe by the time it even starts to come to, as far as Ladson, it'll come to Somerville too. But we had the place here for it. We still got the place here for it, for the bus to come. And when it decides, when the money is available for it to come here, we'll have the place for that bus to come here and turn around. I promise you that. It's not our fault because it's not coming here. It's the whole system's fault that they ran out of money before they come in here. But we will have a place for our citizens to get to the fairgrounds at Ladson. I promise you that. That will happen. They might not be able to get on that big bus, but they'll get on that little bus to get you to Ladson. Okay?
Let me say something to you, Ms. Marchand, about the Juneteenth that you're pushing, which is a noble thought. Are you a member of the Alston Heritage Foundation? Yeah. Okay. I would suggest that you, do you have letterhead or whatever? You do a request to the Alston Heritage Foundation. If you need help with that, I'm sure you could get Mr. Fowler and Mr. Scott and some other people who are involved with that to work with you. And, send a letter to the mayor and the council and just put in a request and see if the council can talk about it, see if something that we think might be something that would be good for the town as far as something historic. When tourists come here, they want to find out the history of the town and all that sort of thing. So this might be something that might be culturally important. But I think it's not what you do, it's how you do it. So I think you with an organization is highly respected. So I would work with that organization and get together, have a meeting and talk about it. Ms. Alma Jones, and there's a lot of good people in that organization. And they've got an acute interest in something like this, and I think they would help you, okay? Thank you. Sure, yeah.
Yes, sir.
William Hamilton.
William Hamilton, best friends of Low Country Transit. I rode the little bus up here today. It takes 4 hours to get from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina to Somerville on the system that they're operating now. And that included a 45-minute wait for the bus, which runs from North Charleston to Somerville, which at various times the smartphone ETA system said was going to come in an hour and a half, come in 11 minutes, come in 29 minutes. If they're trying, I can't see it. And honestly, I wouldn't take these people's word for what did and did not happen in Washington. I don't know who's tinkering with the system precisely. I have my suspicions, but not enough to say in public. But I think that we have the right, in fact, I know we have the right to have the people from Washington come down and tell us exactly who made the decision and how. And I have a real problem with the most important decision about the future of our region being made by people who are not elected. We've spent a long time in this meeting tonight discussing incentives and zoning. It's not much fun. That's government. It's what you were elected to do. And you have the power and the obligation to make the decisions for your community, not somebody who's appointed themselves, who says somebody we've never met decided an entire town of 100,000 people, including the people around it, doesn't need a transit system, and you also accept something that takes 4 hours to get to Mount Pleasant. Part of Somerville is in Charleston County. Those people are paying Charleston County taxes, Charleston County sales taxes. They voted to build this system. This system can come to Somerville without ever crossing the Dorchester County line. So that's not an effective excuse either. A lot of things have changed in Washington since those decisions were made. There are different people in charge. There are major infrastructure bills pending, and the money is there. If it's not used to bring the transit system to Somerville, it'll just be used to bring transit to some state, sit town in Indiana or someplace in New Mexico. And we'll be the ones waiting for the little bus, which never gets there, and wanders in sooner or later to a bus stop on Highway 78. The entire region will come to gridlock, and I'm afraid your downtown will be strangled by the traffic around it. It'll be great for the Ladson Flea Market, but it will not be good for Richardson Square. Y'all deserve better. You also have the right for real information with responsible people's names open to the public, not, well, too bad, so sad, read about it in the newspaper, nice y'all got elected, and thanks for all the time you spent sweating about zoning, but when it's really important, somebody else will decide the future of your town. That's not good enough for Somerville. It's not good enough for anywhere else. It's not democracy, and the more we let it happen, the worse it will get. I thank you for your service. I hope these people will respect you, but the money to build what we need to build is about to be appropriated by the United States Congress, and someone needs to stand up and demand it, because it'll be decades before you get another chance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicky Westberg.
Thank you, Mayor Waring. This is my first attendance since COVID. And thank you, members of council. My name is Vicki Westberg. I live at 182 Golfview Lane here in Somerville. And I would like to read a statement on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Charleston area that includes Charleston, Berkeley, and Dorchester counties. And I'm reading this because if I don't read it, I'm told I go off script over this script tonight. We want you to know that we support you and your efforts as you undertake the challenges of the upcoming municipal redistricting. We understand the very real challenge and complexities you face as you work to plan elections in the midst of redistricting, compounded by the timing of the census data. We appreciate that the task will be daunting as you work to determine the very best district lines for the town of Somerville, if those change. With Somerville's unique challenges and unprecedented growth, as we talked about tonight, the task is made all the more difficult for you. The League of Women Voters believes that the district maps should be drawn that are fair and reflect the standard of one person, one vote. Further, the process of drawing district maps should be open and transparent and include opportunities for meaningful public input. The League of Women Voters is eager to provide its support and assistance however possible. For example, if there is interest to hold public forums, to expand citizen education, citizen awareness, and engagement, the League would offer to help sponsor or organize such events. Likewise, should council choose to form an independent or advisory commission to promote transparency, the League would gladly support and participate in that as well. Please know that we recognize there is no single solution, and it's a very human process, and there are endless factors to consider, and we sympathize with that. After years of study and collaboration with representatives from across the political spectrum, the League has developed useful guiding principles for redrawing district maps and are happy to share them with you as you work to strengthen your discussions and decision-making. We certainly share your commitment to seek the best outcomes for the voters of the town of Somerville. And again, we stand eager to support your efforts and are available to ask any questions at any time.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Make a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel, legal, and contractual matters.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. We go in.
Motion, please, items A through G that's on the agenda.
Items A through G on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
You want them all read?
No, sir.
Oh, that's to discuss items A through G on the agenda.
Second. A motion made and seconded. We go to executive session to discuss A through G on the agenda. Any discussion? If not, all in favor signify by raising the right hand, saying aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. Motion carried. On the executive session.